so hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar on test automation at scale. We have had some time to settle down and now we'll get started. Allow me to firstly provide some quick introduction. My name is Emma. Emma Huynh. I am a part of the account management team here at Katalon. Joining me today, we also have Chris from our solution engineer team. If you follow our previous webinar in our future of testing series, you may already have known Chris. Chris, would you want to say hi?
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. As Emma says, I'm a part of the solution engineer team, so I'm the technical one of the pair of us. So by all means, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll be able to address them. And I'll personally make sure all of them are answered as quickly as possible.
Awesome, thank you, Chris. Besides Chris and myself, we also have Antoine from our business development team. Antoine, would you want to give a quick intro about yourself too?
Sure, I'll stay mostly in the background just for, logistic but my name is Antoine. Obviously I'm working with Chris and Emma to organize this event. And hopefully if you have any other topics you would like to have us cover, feel free to let us know. We're still working on the program as we speak.
Awesome, very nice. Thank you, Antoine. Once again, we are very happy to see everyone here. And let's get into our webinar. So today's webinar is a continuation of our series, Future of Testing. We will dive deeper into the topic of scalability in testing. The purpose is to address a test automation strategy that scales directly and proportionately to your company growth, team growth, and application size. For today, we have quite a concise agenda. Firstly, we will look at some facts about scaling up test automation and areas Katalon can help with. Then Chris will provide you a live demo on how the approach looks like in action. Finally, we will spare the last 10 minutes to answer some questions you may have. All right, so let's get into that. I would like to start with some facts, and we have been talking to thousands of organizations that they are adopting test automation into the DevOps cycle as well. So many times in the first meeting, we hear the same request that the QA team was looking for a low-code tool that was easy to record and playback with the ability to integrate with CI/CD pipeline. However, not many teams really lay out the scaling between their current and future workloads. Whether or not there would be any change in the application tech stack or technology the organization is going to adopt in the next 2 years, for example. So those components were not taken into consideration, and that is the first common mistake in setting success metric of any solution evaluation. So as you can see here is a survey done by our partner Katalon. So 25.9% of the tech decision maker admitted that the biggest challenge with scaling test automation is choosing the right tool, followed by setting the right test automation approach with 17%. So why does it happen? Why suddenly the right tool after evaluation isn't the right tool anymore? Same team, same infrastructure, same resources, unable to keep up with the workload anymore. Why suddenly it is hard to do reporting? Why suddenly things start to get messy, basically. And the reason is, as scaling up, development and QA team are constantly being asked to do more with less and release faster without sacrificing quality, not spending more. And so what happened is that your script will just get more and more complex. The first test suite took time to alter, and then spending effort fixing it even more painful, basically. And then keeping up with the standard of quality, competitor standard. To do that, the requirement for your test coverage on more platform and more device will increase. Your test lab environment also need quicker and quicker setup and adjustment to keep up with your increasing need. your ecosystem will expand as well. Tools to be integrated will add more on top of each other, and which will add more complexity to orchestrate all of this. And then, finally, all of the limitation above make it harder for the decision maker, the team lead, to decide on the critical workflow, what to test, what to prioritize. So without careful thoughts on the right strategy, at all stage of the testing cycle, you can see here, the risk of the whole solution no longer work in the long term will get bolder as you scale. So what I mean is recording and playback is a good first step, but as automation mature, it is not so much of a one step and done perspective. It is a growing and increasing conversation. That is where you should start with automation, test case development right in the middle of your testing cycle. But from there, don't forget to take your test creation effort and introduce quality into all the part of your testing and your life cycle as well. Right, so how Katalon can help with all of this issue? The approach we are going to demonstrate today is to help you achieve a consistent growth, and that is to focus on 6 crucial items mentioned here. Firstly is reduce test preparation time. So the approach today will help you keep this test preparation time simple, concise, organized, and achievable for everyone in the team. Even with the low code background, you want to be able to record and playback script automatically or using keyword for no code experience QA. However, you would want the script option as well for folks that can be more productive with this mean, and that is something we can definitely help with. Then when you have the right tool, you then leverage it. So ready to use things like tags to organize your test case. So it will help you easy to chase back or prioritize run as well. So it will make your work easier in long run. The goal here is for your team to grow without dependencies on any particular QA engineer or the one with coding experience. So the script can scale up without getting messy. Embrace reusability is another key objective to scale. So taking too long to design tests is one thing, but taking too long to redo tests is another challenge. Changes will be made within the application. Adjustment needed to be made to actually test whatever those new changes are. So you suddenly would not want to redo the whole scenario all over again. How can you reduce this rework effort? The best practice is that you can utilize self-healing. Let Katalon auto-fix the broken locator for you. You can maximize the reusability of your test artifacts by exporting them for reuse in other test case, or you can even call existing test case in another test case to minimize your rework effort. Furthermore, you can even add if-else statement, looping statement as easy as just using an Excel sheet. So we will show you some best practice in the details demo in a bit. The next item to hit on is environment. Many QA leads forget that the environment takes time to set up and maintain as well. So to ensure you have the most flexibility and control over your test lab environment is crucial. Reduce as much as possible dependencies on other IT department. We have all been there, right? Waiting for the IT team to make change and provide you access to your own environment so you can do work, when you definitely want to focus on more important things than that. So things like running on Docker container and cloud host environment could be an easy solution, which is also available with our Test Cloud solution suite as well. So all of this is to ensure the preparation for the next goal. Speed up and isolate test execution. Your workflow, your workload will never decrease. Thus, you sure to have enough resources to test more and faster. We'll highly recommend you to plan for parallel execution, cross-browser, cross-OS as well as possible, especially the independent suite. So to ensure that both speed and quality. So meanwhile, don't forget to isolate those execution. So if one test fail in the suite of tests, it can be rerun easily and does not affect the overall execution to avoid fail positive. The end goal here is to deliver a system that is under control and reliable. The fifth thing is team collaboration. It is also frequently forgotten. Teams are made of different kind of people with diverse skill sets. And these people may include test automation engineer, developer, or software developer, engineer in test. You want to start practicing. So if you want to start practicing or test automation, then it's not just about the skill level of your team. You must also ensure that people have environment to communicate openly. So yes, you would want to have a tool that is intuitive so everyone can use. And that is also need to be comprehensive enough to cover all complex test cases and to be a one-stop shop for all technology for the application and the test you're looking to test. Furthermore, not only test authoring, you would like to have that same tool to be able to execute, host run, reporting as well. Most importantly, you would want to be able to integrate with your current and future DevOps tool. Whether you use Git or Jenkins or Azure or Jira, you want to be able to plug in with those. Fortunately, our solution can play with all big players in the market. And furthermore, our test ops solution can orchestrate the whole DevOps streamline and help you keep it in one place and keep everyone's activities in the same page. And that is the approach we are going to take today. Finally, before getting into the demo, let's touch on the data a bit. So data is critical. We talked to a lot of organizations, and what happened is that everyone is using some kind of open source reporting tool or Excel sheet, simply just show it in Jenkins, for instance. There is no really centralized view, especially for scale team. So after all hard work of preparing execution tests, result and action item are what most matter. But without a comprehensive data pool, it is hard for the decision-making team to make a good judgment into test requirement, what suite to be prioritized, what tests are needed to be done. It is just hard to gauge the quality, the speed, the risk at any time during the dev test cycle. Management stakeholder want and always desire for more accessibility and visibility into the team testing effort. And that is also what we are going to resolve in today's demo as well. All right, so that is enough of me talking. Let's get into the demo and see how all these boxes can be checked, with what technique, infrastructure, and what tool. I will stop sharing now and leave it to Chris taking over the demonstrate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emma. So what we're going to do is we are going to kind of walk through our platform and go through a majority of the capabilities. And again, we're going to be focusing on a lot of the main things that Emma has brought to you guys, reusability, ease of use, being able to create a collaborative environment for your testing efforts, as well as, cross multiple teams and silos like your developers and quality assurance. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. And much like every good story, we're going to have a hint of what it looks like at the end. And we're going to focus there on how we're going to get to that point. And what that end is going to look like is, what is my environment going to look like when I have test data? What do I look like when I have results funneling into my test ops environment, which is, again, our orchestration and analytical tool that will help us create, infographics, as well as the tool that will help us share our test results across multiple users and other people who are contributing to the testing of the applications and projects. So what I'm showing you right now is test ops, and we're going to start off in our reporting capabilities. Now, what our reporting capabilities is going to show you is that there's a hierarchy of sorts. First off, we have test cases that we're going to be creating in Katalon Studio, and we're going to then create a test suite, which is a collection of test cases, and run them. What you see right now is an overview of what those test suites look like, and we can actually start looking at some high-level infographics to answer some very important questions. One of the main ones that I like to share with you guys is how well are we actually standing from an execution side of things, right? So when it comes to a mature automation environment, we're focusing on the factor of not creating test cases, but how well are we executing, and are we actually able to address them in a timely fashion? Here we see in the execution trend chart that we have, not only can we see the pass-fail testing efforts, but we can also see that there is an abnormal amount of executions that are happening not on a consistent basis. What we want to see in your guys' environment of test ops is that we want to see a nice little trend of increase of test cases. And once you hit your peak your peak coverage, then you can start focusing on addressing that pass-fail ratio. Okay. Going down a little bit further, we also give you kind of some visual aid into seeing how well you're covering in regards to other platforms and mixturing of operating systems. So for web applications, if you want to be looking towards, how well you're covering your Chrome browser versus Firefoxes versus other browsers that we support, and any mixture between those and specific environments, we actually can start showing you what that looks like. Now, a couple of things to note is that Katalon Studio tests are actually cross-browser support. So you're not going to have to create a Chrome test case and a Firefox test case. More specifically, you will just be showing how well you're able to cover across all of these, and if there's any problems with those individual test suites, what is going on with them, okay? And this is just kind of showing us a high-level view of what to expect when we have a lot of this information. But let's jump back into Katalon Studio, where we can actually start focusing on how easy it is to create these test cases and how easy it will be to actually start accumulating these data points so that we can actually start seeing how these questions and graphs are created for us. And to do that, we simply need to go here and click on our test case. Now, I already have a number of test cases already created inside of this project, but we're going to create a new one. And this is going to be against one of our web applications that we have. I'm just simply going to copy and paste the URL to said application. So when we come to create a new test case, there's multiple ways we can do it. We can go here, we can create a new test case and give it a name. Let's call it healthcare. Okay, healthcare app. We can give it a simple description and we can give it a tag. Tags can be utilized in something called a dynamic test suite. So if we want to incorporate this as a regression test suite, sanity test suite, happy pass, anything like that, we can add those here. And with a dynamic test suite, we can just pull in everything based off of a very specific tag or tags and accumulate them from that method rather than just manually adding them one by one. So in this case, I'm just going to say the health tag. When we create this new one, we're brought into our manual perspective. Again, with Katalon Studio, we are not separating the QA and developers in regards to what assets they work on. Instead, we allow them to work within the same test assets within the object repository and have access to the same test script, just shown in a different perspective. So what we're going to do now is just actually record a simple test script by going to our web recorder. We're going to then type in or copy and paste our URL that we want to start our script recording session in. And we're going to choose a browser. Again, cross-browser support, but also, it's based off of the machine that you want. So we support Edge IE for Windows, but if you want to be doing Safari, you would have to use on a Macintosh, and you will see those browsers being reflected. Again, if you want to record in one and playback in another, you can easily do so by simply just changing the browser. Now, once we launch our recording sessions, we're going to go into the expanding view, and we can actually see our general test steps being captured in real time. Not only that, but if I were to click on the captured object view, I can actually start seeing how my individual items or objects in my test case is actually being recorded and being identified. Not only that, but I can also modify it as well. So let's say, for instance, make appointment. I click on make appointment, I can see that the test is generated. I can see the object being captured. And this is kind of our first glimpse into how our actual object is going to be identified. Kind of going from the top down, we have a view of what that is from a storage perspective. We do store these based off of pages by default. But if you want to change that for any other structural folder structure that seems more logical to you guys, by all means, you can change it to fit that need. Then we can easily change the selection method. Things like XPath, attribute, CSS, or image base. Again, there are pros and cons for each and every one of them. So if there is a reason why you do not feel like an XPath is suitable, you're not stuck with it. Instead, you can easily switch between attributes or through CSS or through any of the other selection methods. And you can find which one works best for the UI element that you're trying to automate against. For instance, I find attributes to be very good for UI elements that move around on the screen or are dynamic in nature, because it's easier to parameterize properties than it is to parameterize a whole XPath. In which case, those are the kind of pros and cons to switch between the two. Not only that, but if we were to continue on generating this test case, in this case, I'm just going to type in some information. Logging in. Again, select some of the drop-down menus, checkboxes, radio buttons. I can also type in here, some stuff that you would normally see. There are a couple things that we can also do while we're recording, is that we can also verify and highlight specific elements on the page while we're in the recording session. So not only can I utilize different ways of identification while I'm recording, but I also can verify if said way is being properly identified. In this case, you can see that we were able to find one element and using through an XPath selector. In this case, it would be through the ID text _ comment. Okay. We can book an appointment. I need to fill out a date, so I can just do that. We will delete these two steps. Again, this is easily we're easily able to modify and edit the test case as we record. And then from here, we can go through a number of things. First off, if you are wanting to add verification steps, you can do that, pretty simple. You can just click on it and then modify the actual step. So instead of clicking on it, we can just say, verify element is visible or checked, or any of the other verify elements. Okay, this is just to showcase you just how easy it is to add and modify steps without just having to worry about going from point A to point B in the application. Okay. Once our test script is done, we can actually then save the script. And then it will bring up some things in regards to our object repositories and how we're going to be identifying it. Again, I have worked on this application before in this project. So all the red highlighted objects are things that already existed, to which I have three options. I can merge the changes into the existing ones. I can create duplicates of each other, or I can replace the existing ones. In this case, I'm going to replace the existing ones. From here, we can go into a number of things. First off, we can start talking about the self-healing insight and kind of showcasing how easy it is to actually maintain these test cases without you really having to go out of your way and modify the objects in the object repository. Simply put, I'm going to go inside the object repository for a given object, and I'm going to purposely sabotage it to fail by simply saying the ID for the make appointment button is actually fail instead of the button make appointment. Now, if I were to run this test case, what's going to happen is that it's going to launch my environment. It's going to hit that first problem, which is the fact that it cannot identify this make appointment button. And it's going to incorporate something called self-healing insight. Now, what the self-healing insight is going to do is that it's going to compare all the other saved XPaths that we have generated in recording. And it's going to see if any of them are matching to a UI element that is on the screen at that moment. If it finds the answer, what is going to happen is that on the resolution of this test case, we can then, automatically update that object to utilize the new propose locator, and we can then continue on with the test case like as normal. Again, I'm not going to need to know anything about maintaining automation, nor do I need to worry about how it's being properly identified. I have a verification saying that this test did in fact pass. But if I were to go into the Self-Healing Insight tab, I can see that there was a problem. Again, we can see the failed locator, the proposed new locator, and we have the option of either approving or discarding it. If I hit approve, what's going to happen is that now the make appointment button is going to be updated. Again, I'm going to have to close this, go back into here, and we can actually start opening it again to refresh it. And we can see now, instead of fail, it is now utilizing another locator from this list right here. We go back to it and we hit play. You can actually now start seeing how faster this test case can actually execute once everything is properly identified. Now, this is another thing that's going to be impacting some of the test execution. So what you'll start noticing is in test ops, which we'll touch on a little bit later on, that the test cases will be showing you the actual, apologies for this, the actual performance of your test cases, in which case you will be able to see a number of the actual spikes, in which case those will be instances that self-healing insight or other variables will be impacting it that you may want to address later on. So in regards to other applications, so mobile or web, we can easily record against them. The difference between mobile and web recording, simply put, if we had an Android device, all we would really need is, instead of a URL, we need a device and we need an application file. So if you're working with an Android device, you can have it running, if you wanted to run it locally in the background, you will then have to have Appium installed so that we can actually start interpreting some of the actual actions. It'll be listed here, and then you simply supply us with the APK or IPA file from here. And then the recording session is pretty much the exact same thing. Only given fact is you'll have the device view to interact with, and you'll associate each UI element with a given action from this list that you see here. Past that, once the test case, so that recording session is done and you have objects in the object repository, adding steps is simply just done. It's simply done by clicking the add phase and finding the actual step that you want to be creating, and then reference the object that you want to actually act on. Now, going into APIs, APIs can be easily incorporated in a hybrid approach. So if you're wanting to be doing mobile API or web API, you can easily do so by simply right-clicking, going into the import feature, and then we have a wide range of different import methods. So if you're working with Waddle, Wisdle, Postman, SoapUI, Swagger, OpenAPI 3, anything of those natures, you can import your API into Katalon Studio, and you can actually start incorporating them inside of your test case. Again, if you want to incorporate, this is a web script, but if you want to add, some web service keywords or API keywords, you can easily do so by just selecting it from the drop-down menu and selecting any of the actions from here. For parameterization, we can easily go to another project that I have set up for us. So I'm going to click OK for that. And this is going to showcase you what that API looks like inside of an object repository, as well as how do we parameterize those cases. For APIs, again, once we have them imported, you can see them being posted and highlighted in the object repository. Again, you can easily put these inside of a API, inside of a folder, call it API for whatever purpose that you guys see fit or whatever name you want to give it. And then from there, you can actually start incorporating them into test cases. Notice that in this test case, we're going to be making a simple API call to create a new user. And this API call takes in some parameters. In this case, variables that are called age, username, password, and gender. If we wanted to see this in a script view, we can easily do so, by simply going in the script tab. And we can go into the section and start seeing those variables being underlined here. Now, key note to kind of take away from this, these aren't variables that are created in the script. These are variables created inside the variable tab, which is why you don't see any, Java-based instantiation. In this case, we're going to be going into the variable tab, and we can create them from here. This is so that we can actually start tying actual external data from things like Excel sheets, CSV files, or database queries. And we can actually start data driving our test case to run on multiple iterations, utilizing that data that we get from other sources. In this case, we have some parameters that we establish a certain type, whether that be string, numbers, or Booleans, and we can give it a default value so that if for whatever reason we don't have a point of interest, we can easily start going into resolving those empty slots by default. Now, for the actual parameterization, apologies for this. For the actual parameterization, what we're going to be doing is incorporate these variables and then tying them to a specific data file. This is when I was referring to external data. By doing that, we can simply just create a new one, test data, and select from the drop-down menu. Key note is that Excel sheets is simply finding them on the local machine or on some shared drive. But for databases, we support SQL-like databases, and for that, you would need to go through some configurations. Those configurations can easily be found within the project settings tab and go inside of the database section. From here, simply supply us the JDBC driver that you're incorporating and a connection URL that is to your database, as well as your username and password. Once done inside of a SQL query or inside of a database data file, you will be able to edit and modify a SQL query, like select star from table to put a basic one into your mind. And you can actually start pulling information based off of that. That information will be pulled into as a table, which will be showed in this fashion. In this case, it's an Excel sheet, and to which we're going to be incorporating the parameterization of specific variables, the age, username, and password, as well as the gender of these users. Notice that we have 11 different entries of data. This means that when we parameterize our test case, we're going to be doing so 11 different times. Now that we have an understanding of our variables and where our external sources of data is going to be, we need to tie the two together. And what we can do is actually go back to our test case. And we went through the manual script and variable section, but now we need to go to the data binding. Here we actually start seeing a list of data files that we've already added. But again, if we wanted to add more, we simply need to just select the add button and select the ones that we want to go into. From here, we can actually then go into a specific variable, in this case, age, and we can answer 3 questions, right? What kind of information do I want? In this case, we have options like columns, specific index of a data column, or we can use the default value, in which case for age, it would be 25. Once we select that, we say data column, in this case, and I want a column of data from a specific file, that file being list of users. And then from that list of users, the specific column of data that I want is the age column. Again, these are all accessible from once you click on the right side of the screen or right side of the column, and you'll see all of the points of data that you have access to in that file. From here, once we have this all created and instantiated, which you see as in front of you, we can simply play this and it'll execute 11 different times, all utilizing those different data points and having more of a thorough use case for it. And that's pretty much it in regards to parameterization, understanding mobile, API, and web. The next thing to do is to set it up to send information over to test ops. So for test ops, what is going to happen is that you're going to have your test cases and you're going to create a test suite. Simply put, a test suite is just a collection of test cases that we can then focus on. In this case, I'm just going to switch back to our other test case because there's a little bit more data there. To which we're just going to focus on a number of things. So in here, I have a number of test suites already created. If I were to add a new test case, let's say the test health, sure. From here, I can actually just start adding multiple test cases as well. But if we go into another one called test suite collection, which is the next level up, which is not so much a collection of test cases, but a collection of test suites, we can start focusing on environments, right? So not only are we able to say that this test suite is going to be running in a specific browser, in this case for web applications, but we also can assign a specific profile. You're probably wondering what a profile is. A profile is simply a way for us to have, as developers would refer to as global variables, things that would have data points that we may be interested in multiple different test cases that we can have easy access to. In this case, we have a default profile, which has access to the URL as well as a number of other things to the given application we're trying to test under. You can input anything in here as a global variable, and you can just start incorporating that into different test cases. One of which could be username and passwords, or other things that should have a global reach on all of your test application projects. So once we have our test suites all created and instantiated, we then just run it. If we have our test ops integration already enabled, which we can simply done by clicking on this blue square on the top right, give it a username and password and the URL, give it a organization and team project, we're going to be sending all of these results and all of the errors that we find in our testing efforts into our instance of test ops, which will bring us back to where we were in the beginning. So now we have the understanding of how these actual test results are gathered and actually how we create these test cases. But let's start focusing on how we drill down from them, right? We have an understanding of that high level view, but where do we go from here? Well, what we can do is that we actually start looking at some of the results, and we can start narrowing down what kind of performance do we want to see. Obviously, what we're doing is that we're having a high-level view of all of our test results simply by going in the test run summary of test results subtab. And we can see here that there's a lot of inconsistent test results, which is something that we don't want. In a perfect world, what we want is that we want to see the ratio between pass-fail, steadily going up as time goes on. But the world is never perfect, and neither is testing. So we always want to make sure that we try to accomplish two things, right? First thing is make sure that all of these errors are resolved as much as possible. And the second thing is that we want to make sure that we have as few failures as possible. The reason why I put errors over failures is because with errors means that we don't have any insight at all inside of a given app, inside of our testing efforts, and specifically inside of our application as a whole. So that means that we don't know what's going on. It could be a failure, it could be a pass. So those are the big things that we want to resolve, and they're pretty easy to resolve as well. Most of the time, it's just a pipeline configuration that you need to point to a specific testing assets. For failures, that's when we start going into things like a failed verification step, things that are causing the test to not be able to work, things that you want to be able to create defects on and actually start, handing them back to your developers to address in a timely fashion. Once those are resolved, there's also the possibilities that these test cases are old and need to be maintained in some way or fashion. In which case, we need to then go back into our test case, make sure that we're able to identify each and every object in those test cases so that we can go into it. Again, self-healing insight will be able to assist you in that regards, but it is just another tool in your toolkit to kind of help you with all of the object identification problems that you'll come across when it comes to automation. So we can actually start narrowing this down based off of test runs, and those test runs are simply put for test to understand what those are. Those are scheduled test suites being executed on specific environments. We'll go into how we schedule those test runs a little bit later on, but from here we want to look and identify some problems. Let's say we want to check to see if there's any major problems within the logout story. Looks like everything's working completely fine, no problems there. But if we were to go into, let's search the candidate tests, let's see what kind of results we see here. Here we actually start seeing, one of those problems. A couple of things actually that we can start seeing from here. First off, it only ran once, which means that there's a test case out there, or there's a test suite actually, that's being utilized, underutilized, and in fact isn't even being executed as often as it should. So again, having this visual aid and being able to address these these big questions are something that we can provide you because we have those data points and because you're providing us information for these infographics to fill in the gaps for having those stand-up meetings. So what we can do now is to have an understanding that, okay, this specific test suite is giving us a problem. We may want to kind of go into understanding why this is the case. But to do that, we need to go into test cases, which is going down to the most granular level. And we can actually start, filtering it by name. But for the sake of time, we're just going to go into the nearest problem and, see what kind of information we can see here. So from here, we can actually start doing a number of things, right? We can look at the individual test cases. For those who are incorporating JIRA as a requirement in Defect Tracker, this is probably an important thing for you to take note on, is we are able to create a traceability matrix simply by importing your requirements and being able to create defects inside of here. And we can tie that together with, have a requirement tied into a test case, tied into a test result, tied into a defect. And you can start seeing that full spectrum, which we can go into a little bit later on. Below that, we actually start seeing performance of the test case, execution time. This test case actually takes to actually resolve. So we have an average here about 13 seconds. Let's say, for instance, that self-healing insight was kicking in. Now that test result, that performance is going to go from 15 seconds to maybe like 40 or 30. These are all the times when we want to maybe, kind of raise an eyebrow and be like, there's probably something wrong with it, right? So we can go back into our test case, know exactly which test case needs to be modified and maintained, and we can actually go continue on from there. Going down a little bit further, we actually see the reports and results of our individual testing efforts. If we were to click on this little blue box here, we actually see the individual reports. In this case, we have a null pointer to an object. Simply put, someone made a click action on a test case and it wasn't pointing to an actual object, so therefore it's a null value. Simple thing to fix, go in the test case, make sure it's pointing to an object, and you can continue on with your running and executing the test case. Kind of going above there, we can create defects from here as well. So if you are wanting to simply grab and understand the problem of the test case and create a simple defect for it, This is probably something that you want to point to a QA person rather than dev, since this is more of a QA issue. If we wanted to verify any other informations, we have attachments as well. We didn't go into it, but one of the actions that you can actually choose from that drop-down menu in your manual test cases, or just in general your test cases, you have screenshots. You can take screenshots on failures by simply flipping a switch, or you can take screenshots as steps. So if there's a specific point where you want to, pardon me, where there's a specific point where you want to actually incorporate, visual testing, or if you want to just simply have a verification on what the application looks like, that is how you'll be accomplishing it. By the way, visual testing is a capability that we offer through TestOps and Katalon Studios. You will need the two to work together. And from there, you can actually start incorporating some of the AI-based identifications for it. For today's demonstration, we don't have the time for that. However, we can easily touch on that when you guys reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about it. Last thing I want to touch on is execution, right? So we have gone through creating the testing assets, organizing it in such a way that we can actually reutilize test suites. Now we actually want to, put an offhands, right? I don't want to hit the play button anymore. I want to just say, run this test case this many times, targeting these environments. And, I just want to focus on getting the results in a very automated fashion. The way we do that is that we can schedule a test run. This is where we can answer three questions: the what, where, and when kind of stuff. What are we running, right? With the projects that we actually have created in Katalon Studios, we simply need to save them inside some repository. It could be Git, GitLab, GitHub, anything from like AWS code commit. There's a number of different ways of repositories that we save and we can work with. Once we have a reference to that project, we will then, set up the environment, what browser we want to run it on, what profiles we want to run it on, as well as, once we have the what answered, now the where. Where do we want to execute this test case? Well, we have two options in regards to, from a Katalon standpoint, one of which is Test Cloud and the other is KRE. Test Cloud is for web applications as of its latest version, in which case you can actually start, instead of focusing, having all these physical machines, which is going to be required for Katalon runtime engines. Instead, you can just focus on, virtualized environments that we create on our side. And you simply say, run these test cases on these environments, and we do the heavy lifting. You won't have to worry about the physical costs and maintenance of these machines. However, if you're working under a compliance of not having any SaaS-based solutions, or if there's any data privacy that you're not allowed to, you have to comply with, we do offer an on-prem version through Katalon Runtime Engine, which is going to be needed for integrating with with on-prem solutions. So if you are wanting to execute off a machine that you can have complete control on, you can easily incorporate those as well. And again, this is all just infrastructural choices, right? So if you have to make the choice between one, that's most likely the choice you would be making on is, do I want SaaS or do I want on-prem based execution speed? And this is all to help you gauge the actual scale of your execution that you want to be achieving. Once we have the what and where, now finally the easiest one to answer is when, right? How long do I want to run this test run on, and how often do I want to do it for? So I can say this can take place, between now and 6 months from now, or a year from now, or 12 years from now. Some day and time is essentially we can establish for that, and then we can say, how often do I want to run it? Do I want to run it once a week? Once a day, once an hour? Any of those iterations, we can even modify this to run 20 times a minute if we have if we really wanted to. But to which we can then save this scheduled test run, and we now don't have to worry about it. It's gonna once we have all of the testing assets and all of the things being in reference properly configured, we now just focus on maintaining and looking at the analytics of the actual result that we get back into it. Now from here, we do have about 10 minutes, a little bit over 10 minutes, which I want to go through Q&A sessions. But again, this is a foundational knowledge. Don't expect this to be the only things that we can provide. Obviously, there's other integrations that we can go into, like CI/CD pipelines, other ALM, lifecycle management solutions that we integrate with, and to which I implore you guys, if you're interested and you're curious, by all means, reach out to us and we'll address all the questions as you can. But in that time, let's end today with a 10-minute Q&A session. I'll stop sharing my screen and we can start taking those questions. As we are answering these questions and as you're waiting for your question to be answered, I am going to launch a poll to which I would ask you guys to kindly fill out for us. Again, any feedback for what we should do and how we improve this would be greatly appreciated. So if you guys are in the Zoom meeting, simply select the in the menu option, there should be a poll selection to which you'll be able to answer these questions. Right, so let's see, any questions that we need to answer? Let's go through this. Let's see. Antoine, do you have any questions that you want me to answer or Emma to answer?
Yeah, so I'm typing a few answers here already, but just give me 1 second. Let me pull over the most asked questions here.
Sure.
All right, so we received some of the questions over the email before our webinar, and I see some of them are really good questions. So the first one is, what are some ways to improve test execution speed? Will you share with us some insights and some best practice on this, Chris?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the best way to improve execution speed is to make sure that the objects that we're identifying are very concise, right? So a lot of people who are coming into automation without any experience, they usually say, oh, it's taking so long, right? For the most part, a lot of people, they'll not realize that the self-healing insight is actually being enacted, to which it takes, 10 seconds at the bare minimum to resolve, one step. So if all your steps are being utilizing self-healing insight, that's something that you may want to address. First, I would tell you to make sure you resolve all those self-healing insights, approve the ones that you're interested in, or the ones that make your actual test case work. But after that, if it's not if you don't want it turned on all the time, you can easily flip it off, right? You can easily just turn the capability off and you won't have to worry about that. The other thing that will be enabled by default is something called Smart Wait. Now, Smart Wait is a feature. I can share my screen briefly to show you what that looks like and where to go and how to resolve it. So if we go inside our Katalon Studio instance and we want to disable the Smart Wait capabilities, we go into our project settings, go inside the execution and the web UI, and there is this Smart Wait enabled. What is this doing, right? Smart Wait is essentially saying, I'm going to wait until the application is completely loaded, and then I'm going to act on to the next step, right? So if your application is doing a lot of back-end work, if it's pulling in information from the back end, or if there's a lot of modules that need to be loaded and prepped for, like on the DOM page and sorts, you may not want to turn this on, or you may want to go with a more modified version of, like a more manual version of waiting between commands. The reason why is because if you have to pull information based off of every action, it's going to increase the execution speed, or it's going to decrease the execution speed pretty significantly. So simply put, you can disable it. But just understand if there's a problem with identifying a specific step, it could be the fact that you're waiting for an object that doesn't exist, and it could just quickly fail. So that's one of the two major ways that a lot of our customers experience that. Past that, I would say that there are a number of variables that can kind of come into play. First off, internet speed and hardware resources towards RAM specifically, because when it comes to automation environments, especially if you're going to do parallel execution, those are very RAM intensive operations. Any other questions, Emma? It seems like you're on mute.
Oops. Regarding how many calls I try, always forget that part. And yeah, so I received the most second vote question is that what is the best way to execute tests on various system and environment? Like, what would the best way to do that?
Okay, so there's a number of ways we can touch on that, right? First off, test suite collections, that is an option. I didn't show it in the scheduled test runs, but you can actually execute based off of test suite collections as well as test suites. Simply put, this is when we can start focusing on environments. Like for web applications, it's simply saying instead of Chrome, I can run this on any of the other supported browsers that we have access to. And also, if we wanted to work on specific environments, that is where we can go inside of the scheduled test runs and start focusing on, if we wanted to be inputting in, different environments for this sort. So I can say Chrome. I don't have the test cloud tunnel instantiated, but something along these lines. When we start focusing on test cloud, we have a list of operating systems and web browsers that we can actually supporting with, and we can have a number of combinations selected on top of those. So that is another option that you have for various systems and environment targeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. That's just really helpful. So I think we still have 3 minutes. So I will go through the third questions being asked most as well. Is that how do you prioritize test case for regression testing or auto execution?
Okay. So when it comes to prioritizing test cases for regression testing and or auto executions, I would say it is a personal choice of mine to go with value over coverage. So what are some points that are going to be important to verify in a given iteration of development, right? So if I'm working on an e-commerce site and I'm remodeling the payment system, right? And I'm starting day one automation, I'm going to prioritize all of my test case to start testing against that specific payment model and all the new features on it. Because we can assume that if the test cases that were previous to this iteration, were, pretty good, everything works as it should, we can easily kind of start addressing those kind of questions from the, getting pinged. We can actually start addressing those kind of test cases first, okay? Past that, once you have, a mature or, growing automation environment, it comes down to personal or professional preferences, what you deem as most valuable. I always focus on the new features of a build rather than, the generic test cases that most people want to focus on. And so I'll answer one last question and we can go and end today's webinar. Again, thank you so much for answering the polls. We appreciate your guys' feedback as well. So let's see, what is this? What are some of the key best practices for reducing the flaky test issue? So flaky tests, for those who don't know, are test cases that have a tendency of failing and passing and failing and passing for any number of reasons. Often or not, I find the flaky tests to be the case of identification more than it is verification. So what would happen is that when you have dynamic objects, not everything is unique as like an ID attached to some usernames interactions with the application. Sometimes there could be a Boolean that is just flipping on and off, on and off, on and off in the background based off of random situations, to which that can cause misidentifications. These situations are what causes test cases to fail because when we initially record one test case in a certain environment and we play it back, it could be done in a way where the object itself isn't being properly identified. In which case, if the self-healing insight isn't able to pick up on it, it's obviously going to fail. And you run it the next couple of times, it kind of gives you that flakiness. To which I would always say, when it comes to those flaky tests, make sure that all the objects are addressed concisely, and verify if those are being identified through multiple iteration of testing before throwing that into your pipeline execution or into your test runs, so that you can actually know with confidence that when a flaky test occurs, that's mostly inconsistent information being displayed on the application through your verification steps, rather than simply put your test case itself not being consistent with identification.
That's
all right.
Great.
So yeah, with that being said, it is a little bit over the hour. I'm going to end today's webinar. But again, thank you guys so much for taking the time to learn about our solutions and platforms that we offer here at Katalon. If you have any questions, I implore you guys, reach out to us, and we will, myself and or anyone else in our team to actually answer your questions for your future projects and testing automation.
Thank you, Chris. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for being really asking a lot of questions. I know there are still a lot of questions we haven't been able to touch on. We'll definitely email you with the answer. I hope the demo has been helpful, and enjoy the rest of the day.